Hello all, in this video we will be looking at chapter 3, lesson 3. We'll be learning how to write functions. In the previous lessons we did learn how to identify a function, that is, if the value of x or the value of domain is not repeated, then it is defined as a function. So keeping that in mind, here in this lesson we are going to learn how to write functions. So let's get started. So the first question here, they want you to find a relationship, determine a relationship between the x and the y values, write an equation. So what they mean here is we need to find out what has happened between these two numbers, because that means there is a function, because you can see the value of x is not repeated here, right? So we need to find out how did this value of x result in the value of y, or how is this value of y result in the value of x. Both of them mean the same but the opposite ways. So do keep this small tip in mind. If the value of x is greater than the value of y, then that means there has been a addition. Okay, let me write it down here. If the value of x is greater than the value of y, then there has been a subtraction or division. So if the value of x is greater than the value of y, so for example, say if the value of x is 6 and the value of y was 2, so how did the 6 become 2? There should have been a subtraction, that is 6 minus 4 would give you a 2, or there would have been a division by 6 divided by 3. That's how we conclude what has happened. But if the value of x is less than the value of y, that means there has been an addition happening, or it should have been multiplication happening, because they are related operations. Addition and multiplication are related together, and division and subtraction are related together. So this is what you need to keep in mind. That would give you a small bit of help. Okay, so here to start with, we have the value of x as -4 and the value of y as -1. So if you see here, the value of x is less than the value of y. So which means either there should have been a subtraction, there should have been an addition or multiplication which has happened. So let's see, how did this -4 become -1? So if I would put this -4 and -1 on a number line, here we have -4 and then -3, -2 and -1. So from here it became here. That means it has to be plus, because you're going towards the right side, which means plus. So 1, 2, 3. So there should have been an addition of 3 to the value of x. So if it's -4, -4 plus 3 would give us a -1. So the rule here is add 3. Let's see if that's true for all the cases. Let's take the second value. So the value of x there is -3. And the rule which we found out right now was add 3. So is -3 plus 3 going to give you a 0? Yes, it does. So do keep checking for all the remaining values. So let's check that out. You have -2, and the rule we found out was 3, add 3. So is -2 plus 3 going to give us a +1? Yes, it does. So which means the rule of adding 3 is correct. So how are you going to write the equation now? Always start your equation with y equals, or you could even say f of x equals, because that both means the same. So y equals the value of x, we are just adding 3 to the value of x. So that means x plus 3. So this is the equation, and this is how you need to write it. So what has happened here? There have been an addition of 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. So this is the relationship between both of the numbers, between the x values and the y values. So how do we write the equation? What we are adding to the x value, we say it is x plus 3. This is how you determine the relationship between the value of x and y. Okay, now moving to the next question. Here we have ordered pairs. Now to make it more easy for you, let me write it in the table form so that it will be clear. So when the value of x is 2, value of y is 3. When the value of x is 3, the value of y is 5. And let me write it here so a bit more clear. And then value of Let me write it neatly because neat work is more important. So x is 2, y is 3, x is 3, y is 5. Look at the ordered pairs. I'm just writing down the ordered pairs, but in the form of a table so that it will be easy for us to find out the relationship. Okay, now again here the value of x is lesser than the value of y, right? So if the value of x is lesser than the value of y, that means again there should have been an addition or multiplication taken place. So let's try with addition. So we start with 2 and 3. We have to find out how did the 2 become 3. So 2 plus 1 would give us a 3. So which means the rule is add 1. But this rule should be true to all the numbers. Let's check. 3 plus 1. Would that give you a 5? No, it won't. So that means this rule of adding 1 will not work here. So if addition doesn't work, try with multiplication. Is there anything we could multiply 2 and get 3? There is no such number where we could multiply 2 with some number and get a 3. There is no such number. So when you cannot find either for addition or multiplication a rule, you need to combine two operations together. Maybe multiplication and addition, multiplication and subtraction, or you need to combine 2 or 3. So let's try combining 2 or 3. Let's try it this way. How about trying 2 multiplied by 1? So that would give you a 2 plus 1. That would give you a 3. So which means we are multiplying 1 and then adding 1. Now this is just a guesswork because that's what works here. Guesswork will definitely work here. So we need to keep guessing until we get the correct rule. So let's check for 3 and 5 whether this rule works. So we are going to multiply the value of 3 with 1. So that would give you a 3 and then add 1. But that's not going to give us a 5. So that means this rule doesn't also work. Let's try another rule. What do you think we should be trying here? Why don't we multiply and then subtract? Shall we try that? Let's see. Let's multiply this value of x with 2. So 2 multiplied by 2, that would give us a 4, and then minus 1 would give us a 3. So our rule was multiply the value of 2 with 2 and then subtract 1. Let's try if it works with the next set of numbers. So we have the value of x as 3 multiplied by 2, that would give us a 6, and then subtract 1, that would give us a 5. Yes, it works, right? But hold on, don't conclude that this is the rule unless you check one more pair of numbers. Let's try with this pair of 4 and 7. So the value of x is 4 multiplied by 2. This is our rule. We are multiplying it by 2, which is going to give us an 8. Then minus 1, would that give you a 7 as stated in the table? Yes, it does. So which means bingo, there is your answer. So you found out the rule. So as I said, only guessing works here, nothing else. So we have the rule multiply by 2 and minus 1. So let me write that here. Y equals x multiplied by 2 minus 1. Now in algebra, you know, when you multiply a variable with a number, you can write that together. So x multiplied by 2 becomes 2x minus 1. So y equals 2x minus 1 is the rule or the equation for this function. So as you could see, we did get a direct answer also, and we did just guessed how two operations might work. So these kinds of questions totally depends on our guess. So you need to keep guessing until you get the rule. Right, let's move on to the next question. Now here, identify the independent variable and dependent variables in each situation. Now what is independent? All of us know the meaning of independent. Independent means we can do anything alone, stand alone. So this is called independent. And dependent means you are expecting someone's help, or you are dependent on someone. For example, if you want some pocket money, right, you are dependent on your dad for that because dad is the one who is giving money for you. So you are dependent on your dad to get the money. But about studying, you are independent to study because it's your own will that you need to study. right? So this is independent and dependent variable. Now what is that related with these? Let's see. There are two variables here. Variables means the ones which can keep changing. Okay, so in that two variables, one is the independent variable and one is the dependent variable. So let's see how we can identify the independent and the dependent variable in the given situations. So here the given situation is ice cream sales increase when the temperature rises. So what are the two things which could change here? And so the two things which could change is, one is the temperature, right? Because it can rise, it can go up, it can go down. So one is the temperature. And the next one is the sales, the ice cream sales, means how many ice creams they're selling. That can be more one day and less the other day. Now among these two, we need to decide which one is the dominant one here. The dominant one becomes the independent one, means which one is not dependent. So is the amount of ice cream dependent or is the temperature dependent? Which is dependent here? Exactly, temperature is independent, because temperature, there is no control over the temperature. So if the temperature increases, the number of ice cream sold will go up. If the temperature is less, the number of ice cream sold will come down. So totally the ice cream sales depends on the temperature. So what is the dependent factor here? The dependent variable is ice cream sales or sales. So ice cream sales is the dependent factor. Always remember, the cost of something is always dependent. Means if you buy, it depends on how much you buy. If you buy one chocolate, that costs say $3. So if you buy two chocolates, it costs $6. So the cost of something is always dependent on what you buy. So let's see the next question. Food for the catered party costs 12.75 per person. So what are the two variables here? We could say the variable is the cost. As I told, the cost is a variable which can change according to the number. And which is the other variable we have? The person. Person means the people. So food for the catered party costs 12.75 per person. So for one person, it's 12.75. So which is the independent variable among these two? Means which is the one which can keep changing independently without any other information, which is the thing which can change? The people. So the number of people can be more, number of people can be less. Now the sales, that's the cost of the food, depends on the number of people, because if 5 people come, that would cost something around $62. If 10 people come, that would cost $127, 27.50. So number of people is independent, right? Number of persons are independent, and the cost, remember, always the cost of something is always dependent. So the dependent factor is the cost of food. So once you get such questions, first identify the two variables, the two things which can change. But then you decide which is the independent one, that is the one which doesn't have any no need of any dependent factor, and the other becomes the independent. And the hint I would give you is always the cost is dependent on anything. Right, let's move to the next question. Identify the independent and dependent variables. Write a rule in function notation for each situation. What is this function notation? It is nothing but we are replacing y. Now we wrote the equation as y is equal to 2x minus 1. Function notation is nothing but we are going to replace this with a form like this. So inside this, it could be f of x, it can be f of m. It depends on the question which we are doing. So the question here is, Carson charges $7 per hour for yard work. So first let's identify the variables here. What are the two variables here? One is the charges, right? The cost is the variable. And what is the other variable? The number of hours. Because if he works for 1 hour, he gets $7. If he works for 2, he gets $14. So first let's write this. Now they said identify, so let's write the independent variable first. So the independent variable is number of hours, because charge is almost like the cost. So how many hours he works, the amount he earns depends on how many hours he works. So independent, and this is the dependent one. So dependent is the charges per hour. Okay, now in the next one we are going to write a formula. Now how are you going to write a rule, an equation? Sorry, it was not a formula, it's an equation we are going to write. So always our equation starts with y equals, right? So the dependent variable is always y. Remember, the dependent variable is always y, and we start our equation with y equals. So how much does he charge for 1 hour? He charges $7 for 1 hour. How many hours he works? We do not know. So we name it as h or x. It's totally up to you what you want to name it as. He can work for 1 hour, he can work for 2 hours. It's totally up to him. So if he works for 1 hour, he gets 7. If he works for 2 hours, he gets 14. So how do we name this? So we could say this is 7, that is for 1 hour, multiplied by h, which would mean it is going to be y equals 7h. Now, how are we going to write this in the function notation? Because the variable we used is h, so we will replace the f of x, that's the one in the parenthesis, with f of h equals 7h. This is how you write an equation in function notation. Nothing, just that we are replacing the y with the letter function of h. That's all. And we read it as f of h, f of x, and so on, depending on the letter which we choose. Right, let's see this one. K donates twice what it donates. So K is donating. I hope you know what's the meaning of donate. Means to give something for the poor people, to help the people. So K donates twice. Twice is one of the thing which he has to keep in mind. Twice means 2 times. Okay, what ed donates? So here we need to find the independent and the dependent variable. So there are two things. One is how much K is donating, is one of the variable. Another variable is how much ed is donating. So which is the independent variable and which is the dependent variable here? Independent means he can donate how much ever he wants, but dependent means it depends on how much he donates. So whose donation depends on what? K donates twice what Ed donates. So if Ed donates 1, K will donate 2. If Ed donates 4, K will donate twice of that. So Ed's donation is completely independent. Ed can donate how much he wants. So this is Ed's donation. And which is the dependent variable? K's donation depends on X's donation, right? So dependent is K's donation. Now let's write an equation. I know it'll be a bit confusing until you get used to it. So try to do some more practice for these kinds of questions, because it depends on the sentence and how you understand it. So if you don't understand, try to read it again, you will definitely understand. So let's write the equation for this. Y, so dependent, as I told you, dependent is always y, and we start our equation with y equals twice. Twice means 2 times what Ed is donating. So you can say 2 times of E, 2 times of D, totally up to you. So we can again write this as y is equal to 2D, and then in function notation we write it as f of D equals 2D. This is how you need to write a rule in function notation. And always remember, the dependent variable is always y. So charge per hour here is y, and here K's donation is always y. Let's move on to the next question. Now these are super easy questions where you just need to replace or substitute the values which they have given in place of x. But you have to solve each function 2 times. That's what is important here. So evaluate each function for the given input values. So the first one is f of x equals 5x plus 1. So the first function we have is f of x equals 5x plus 1, which means they have given us 2 values for x. X is 2 and x is equal to 3. So once we will solve with f is equal to 2, and then we will solve it with x is equal to 3. So 5 multiplied 2 plus 1, which is going to be 10 plus 1, which is going to be 11. So the next time you will solve it with f of x equals the same function, but you will only replace the number. So f of 3 equals 5 multiplied by 3 plus 1, which means 15 plus 1, which would give you a 16. So the two answers we have here is 11 and 16. So this it's very easy to solve. All you need to do is replace the value which they gave and find out the answer. So I'll just show you one more and then I'll give you the answers, because the same method has to be followed everywhere. So let me do for the g of x. G of x is equal to negative 4x. And what are the values of x they give? Negative 6 and 2. So once you will solve it negative 6, so that's a super easy one. Negative 4 multiplied by negative 6 would give you a positive 24. Similarly, for g of 2, that's going to be negative 4 multiplied by 2, which would give you a negative 8. So the two values we have is 24 and negative 8. So you will solve the next one also in the same way. If you would solve, your answer needs to be a 0 and a negative 2. Just replace x with that. You can even do that mentally. See, x is 3, so 3 minus 3 is 0, and then 1 minus 3 is negative 2. Simple, right? Okay, let's move on to one problem solving now. An aerobic class is being offered once a week for 6 weeks. So aerobic class, almost like a gym, dancing one, right? Once a week. So the class is once a week, but for 6 weeks. The registration fee, that is whenever you go for any kind of gym or any kind of class, there is a registration fee which must be paid. So that's 15. And the cost for each class attended is $10. So if you are attending one class, you need to pay $10. But $15 is a must you have to pay. Later, then how many classes you attend, you need to pay for one class $10. Write a function rule to describe the total cost of the class. Find a reasonable domain and a range for the function. So first let's write the function. So always start the function with y equals, which means this is going to be the cost. Okay, so we start by saying first start by writing the amount which you must pay. So that's $15 which has to be paid, that is 15, and then plus 10 for every class. So we don't know how many classes. So this is going to be your equation, because this is a must pay plus $10 for each class. So this is how your equation is going to look like. Now when you're writing a function rule, so it needs to be f of x equals 15 plus 10x. So let's write the function here first. F of x equals 15 plus 10x. Okay, now they also said find a reasonable domain and a range for the function, which means you have to find out some numbers which would make sense where we could replace this. So the x is what? X is the number of classes whoever is attending, right? So x is the number of classes. So can we take -1 as a value for x? No, because what is -1 for class? That means we are not going for the class, right? So value of x can be 1, it can be a 0, maybe you will register but you will not go for the class. So let's see, let's write down the domain values. Okay, so the domain values we can take as 0, right? You cannot go for any class, it's all right. You can go for one class, or you can go for 2 classes, you can go for 3 classes, and so on. So it totally depends on how many you want to take, because they didn't say, they just said reasonable domain. Now if this is the domain, the range, that's the value of y. Now the range can be called as y, the range can be called as the function f of x. So it's all interrelated with each other. So which means we need to solve this. So it acts like a function table now. So let's see, we are going to replace 0 with x. So that would give you f of 0 is going to be equal to 15 plus 10 multiplied by 0. So that would give you how much? 15, right? So if you're not going for the class, or you have to only pay the registration fee. So that's 15. How about if f of 1? That would give you 15 plus 10 multiplied by 1. That would mean 15 plus 10, then that's going to be 25. So the range value is going to be 25. Similarly, you will solve for all the remaining values for the domain which we wrote. So this is going to be 15 plus 10 multiplied by 2, which would give you a 35. So that's going to be 35, and for the next one, that's going to be 45. So this is how you solve this question. And there you go, you have learned something new, how to write rules and how to write equations and about function notations, because this is the first time I guess you're learning about function notations. So you have learned a combination of new things. You have learned something new. So till we meet again, keep practicing, because that's the only key which will help you in math. That's why I keep repeating in every video. Keep practicing. Without practice, you cannot do math. It's not a matter of just closing a book and keeping. So till we meet again, do comment and let me know how many of you got the answers right.